Hi, welcome to Off Court with myself, Greg Rusedski, and the tennis mentor, Ashley Neaves, and from Tennis 365, we've got Kevin Palmer. Today's show is going to talk about Jannik Sinner. He's lost matches back to back, having not won a tournament. This is a rarity. Is he losing form? Is he losing confidence? Are players figuring him out? I'm not so sure. It's a minor blimp, in my opinion, but let's discuss it. Now, Bandian and Goran Ivanisevic are back in the coaching business. Good to see two legends back. Ivanisevic has had a big impact so far in less than a week. And on top of that, we've got to discuss Emma Raducanu and the big Uniqlo deal. What are the rumors? What are the realities of the numbers as well? And is she worth the money as she was when she was with Nike? Okay, well, let's start this off with Kevin. What's your view on Jannik Sinner, the man you said was going to win all four majors this year? That was your prediction at the beginning of the year.
You trust the journalists to get it right, Greg. You know, we know what we're doing here. But I was surprised that he lost last week. And I have to say, I was surprised he lost to Novak Djokovic at the Australian Open. I was convinced not convinced, that might be pushing it too far, but I had a strong feeling that Jannik Sinner was going to be the player to beat this year. And it just hasn't really worked out for him. And I don't know quite why it hasn't clicked. I mean, he's still a dominant force in men's tennis. And we've got Indian Wells and Miami coming up next month. So let's see how he gets on there. But every sport has this where a player looks like he's going to dominate potentially, or a team look like they're going to dominate, and then they kind of get found out a little bit. We've seen it in the Premier League with Arsenal to a point that they look like they were running away with the title, and then they're getting sort of drawn back in now. It's almost like the players, maybe if the fear factor that Sinner had last year for a period has waned a little bit. I mean, I think it's way too early to say that, to be perfectly honest. I think the main player that can still beat him is Carlos Alcaraz. Let's put this into perspective. But very interesting to see him lose last week. Very interesting to see him lose to Djokovic. I don't know what you think, Ashley. It feels like not quite as dominant and not quite as scary as he was maybe a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these two results in isolation, you could say that. But if you zoom out a little bit and look at his, past 6 months, it's like Greg said, it's a small blip, and I don't think that it's going to change, his dominance in the sport with Alcaraz. I think they're still leading the pack by some way. What I love, though, is each time we see these players lose a match, they come back stronger, and you kind of expected that after he lost to Djokovic, but it was a bit of a shock him losing this next one to Mensik. But they're great athletes, they're great competitors, and I just know that Jannik is going to come back and he's going to be working on his game. He actually said at the tail end of last year that he wanted to make some adjustments to the amount of variety in his game, and it would cost him some matches. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. So, he does need to experiment a little bit to be able to explore different parts of his game. He has in the past been a little bit more one-dimensional than his rival in Carlos Alcaraz. So, I'm not worried for him, but it does make the other players realize that he is human, and hopefully it gives them a bit of hope and belief that they can challenge him. What do you think, Greg?
Well, I think the pack might be getting a little bit closer. I mean, look at Novak Djokovic. He was the only man who won 3 back-to-back Australian Opens. Jannik Sinner was trying to do the same. If you look at every category statistically for that match, Sinner won every category apart from the final point of the match, which was Novak Djokovic. I mean, Novak came up with an incredible performance to find a way to win that match. On paper, it didn't look like it was going to happen. And we're talking about two players in the beginning of the year, Hurkacz and Mensik, going into the Australian Open. And we said, watch out for those two. Mensik, when he's on form, moving well, nobody wants to play him. And let's not forget, this time of year, he starts to play really well. Last year, he beat a certain guy by the name of Novak Djokovic in the Miami final. So you got to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt here. You got to say, okay, he could have easily have won that one, but Mensik played the big points so well. So I'm not worried about Sinner at the majors. We're seeing more variety in his game. And we got to give respect to the rest of the tour. They're starting to lift their games, and that's what we want to see.
Kevin, you're one result down, Kevin, with your 4 Sinner slams. What are you going to change your bet for the next 3 or not?
Yeah, let's revise that, shall we, guys? I think it's time to revisit this. Yeah, I'm thinking Carlos Alcaraz now looks like the guy who's very the beat. Can we go down that road? That's how journalists work, isn't it? We just sort of go with what the flow is. But no, look, I think Carlos is looking amazing. And while we're saying that maybe the pack are getting closer to Sinner, I don't really think they are at the moment. But I think when the big matches come round, Indian Wells, Miami, and we get into the French Open and Wimbledon, I still think those two are the guys to beat. But how good, Greg, is Carlos looking? I mean, he's just fantastic. And everything he does since we got rid of that terrible coach of his last year has just been amazing, isn't it? Huh?
Well, it has been phenomenal with that serve. I like the service motion, the way the wrist is a little bit looser. I like the way I'm taking ownership. I saw this interview where he talked about a sports psychologist. he's been working with the last 7 years and how she's helped him to basically visualize, to understand what he wants, to make sure his ego doesn't get out of place. So I think he's just growing as a man. And, let's give credit to Juan Carlos Ferrero. Samuel Lopez has done a great job. But also, Kevin, I want to give you a little bit of love. It was you and Tim Henman that put Jannik Sinner to win all 4 majors, who's going to be a guest of ours next week on the off court with Greg. So we're looking forward to having him. So you can ask him, why did you have the same choice as I did out there? But let's get on to our next subject as well is, the super coaches are coming back right now. Gregor Dimitrov partnered with Xavier Malisse. He's with David Nalbandian, probably one of the greatest players never to win a major, was at that Wimbledon finals. Nobody liked to play this guy. And then Goran Ivanisevic back with Fils, who made the finals in Doha. So Ashley, being a coach, what do you think of the emergence of the super coach coming back into play?
I love it. I love it because these coaches were playing in an era where I was growing up as a teenager, watching them play, and I love the fact that they still have the passion for the sport. They still are true competitors. They'll be competing in a very different way now, off court, and helping these young upcoming players. It'll be interesting to see what impact they have on the players' games. Now, Bandian is a player that one of my favorite players to watch. One of the cleanest ball strikers. I actually watched him hitting some balls 2 to 3 years ago at Wimbledon. He was working with Kecmanovic, and he was just sitting in the middle of the baseline, just absolutely creaming his forehands and backhands still. So just like you, Greg, still hits a great ball, and I'm excited to see what they bring. One thing I've always said with the fact that coaching is now allowed on the tour, I would love to see these coaches mic'd up. I just want to hear what they're talking to their players about. For me as a coach, I think it would be fascinating, but also for the fans, I think it would be a really cool addition. And then Ivanisevic, again, he's had a lot of coaching experience, and he's got a great player in Artur Fils, and I think he's already made a bit of an impact in that first week of working with him. What do you think, Kevin?
I was down in, before I was even a journalist first, I was with my dad down in Paris watching, was it Paris? It might have been Madrid, watching Nalbandian play Tim Henman on that. It's like a basement court, Greg, you might remember. It was almost like their number 2 court at the time. It was like, almost felt like you were in a shed, and there was hardly anybody in there. It was just me and my dad and about 6 other people watching this match at 11 o'clock at night, and Tim kept looking over at us, asking us, was the ball in or out? He ended up almost squaring up to Nalbandian at the end of the match. It was a proper full-on he was a horrible player to play, wasn't he, Greg? What were your memories of playing him? He was a bruiser, wasn't he? Like a boxer almost of a tennis player.
He was. I never got to play him on tour, but his return to serve was just magnificent. And he was always carrying a little extra weight. So everybody thought the guy wasn't in great shape, but he could go all day. And his timing was sweeter than anybody on the tour. And you're kind of thinking he's the guy who's up there with probably Rios Nalbandian that didn't win a major. And I think it's a good addition to the Gregor Dimitrov team, because actually it was Malisse, myself, we were in the frame in the beginning of the year for possibly that job, because I feel like Gregor's one of those guys that everybody wants to coach. He's one of the nicest guys on tour. He's a complete player. He's got a one-handed backhand to slice, coming back healthy after that match that he should have won against Sinner at Wimbledon. So everybody would like that job. And I think it's a good choice getting Nalbandian because he's a great tactician. And I also agree with Ashley when he was saying, look, I'd love to hear the coaching courtside. That's what the Australian Open did so well. We heard so many good things from Michael Chang when he was with Lerner team, the advice, what was going on court. And I think that just adds another dimension. So let's mic up Nalbandian with Grigor when they're in Indian Wells and Miami together, because it would be fascinating to listen to. Ivanisevic is an interesting one because Fils still has his coach Sink, who is basically with Cilic, the former player that Goran Ivanisevic took the U.S. Open title to win the Slam and coached him and made his career so much better by improving the serve and the forehand. So I think Fils has been bold, he's been brave, and when you add Ivanisevic to the team, that just shows intent. I don't want to be a guy who's just in the top 10. I want to have a chance to win majors. Yes, he got blown away in the finals. Alcaraz was brilliant all week. Probably the favorite match for myself was the Alcaraz Khachanov match there. How well did Khachanov play? And the rallies were superb. But for Fils, huge positive. Great to see the legends of our game coming back into the sport. And
Greg,
finally,
we can't brush over. You mentioned that you nearly worked with Dimitrov. Can you tell us a tiny bit more about that?
Well, I was in the running. That's what the agent told me. I was in the running for the job. I was highly valued, but I didn't get the call up for that. I think he went for the experience because X had been on tour for a lot longer, traveling week in, week out. And it's also a player fit, a relationship thing. And so you don't know what the truth of the matter is sometimes with the agents.
How
Whether
does it
they-
work, Greg? Once you kind of, if you get in contact with the agent, and what's the next step? Is it like a trial week, or does it vary from player to
Well,
player?
it varies from player to player, so it's always different. Usually the best way is when the agent calls you directly. So rather than you going for the job and applying, I've done that on a few occasions when I've been really interested in someone who I feel like I can make a difference for. So I'll write them a report. I'll tell them what I think they need to do. Sometimes they take the information and use it with the other coach, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Because you're just
Is it
showing
though, Greg?
yeah, it's fine. It's because you still have to execute what is there. So even if you have the information, you have to be able to convince a player, and then you have to know how to put it into play. So for me, that's not an issue, because if you want something, you got to show you're keen, and you're going to give a little bit away at times, and that's absolutely fine as well.
Like it, like it. No, we couldn't just brush over that.
Well, let's get into our last topic as well today, and I think we got to talk about Emma Raducanu signing with Uniqlo, going away from Nike. And I know, Kevin, you know a little bit more about the details of this than myself and Ashley.
Well, I think all journalists like to pretend they know the details, Greg. Do they actually know that is the different grade? There was rumours last month this was a $3.5 million deal. Whether that's right, wrong, we just don't know. But it's certainly an interesting one. And I think Nike are looking at sort of maybe not being quite as involved with some of the tennis players. That maybe the players that aren't right at the top, the Carlos and the Yannicks and the Sabalenkas. They're obviously going to want to be part of that world, but they're not obviously looking at players that are ranked around 24, 25. Even if Emma Raducanu is still a major star in women's tennis, and we see from the hits on Tennis 365 that she still generates huge interest. So there's always going to be interest in Emma while she's out there, but we're 4.5 years on from that US Open win, which was arguably one of the greatest sporting achievements of all time than when she did it. It's a long time to wait for somebody. And Nike, down the years, have shown that they don't hang around. They kind of get rid of people if they're not performing well. Whether or not that's what they've done here, we just don't know. But I do think Emma Raducanu needs to work out where she's going at the moment. I'm a bit concerned, particularly with the way she's dropped out of matches recently physically. And we know she had troubles in the off season. We know it's going to be difficult for her to build back up. Maybe she just needs a little bit of time. Her tennis is there. We've seen flashes of brilliance. We've seen sets that have been very good. Putting it all together, can she win 5 matches in a row to win a 250? Not sure at the moment. Physically, not quite there. We had Nick Lester on the podcast a while ago, and he did sort of reference that he thought not quite where she needs to be physically. I don't know what you think, Ashley, but it's a bit worrying that she's not able to get through matches, basically.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully she doesn't listen to too many podcasts and hear us and journalists talking about, what she's getting up to. I think, as you say, she's an incredible player, and just unfortunately, for whatever reason, lacks a bit of consistency, and that kind of shows from having inconsistency in the team. So I'm just hoping that she can settle in with a coach and get some consistency back into her game. But the Uniqlo deal is a cool one. I mean, I'm a big fan of seeing other brands coming into tennis, and Uniqlo have been around now, with Nishikori, Federer, Djokovic for a while now, and you're seeing other brands like Vuori getting involved with Jack Draper. So, I'm actually wearing a Uniqlo cap now, so maybe they'll sponsor the podcast at some point soon. But yeah, it's a cool brand. It's I've got a lot of their clothing for the off court stuff, and it's affordable too. So it's quite nice to see these players promoting brands that aren't super extortionate with their prices, and they make good clobber. But yeah, as far as Emma's tennis goes, let's just see what happens over the next few months. I'm rooting for her. Yeah, what do you think, Greg?
Well, I think the Uniqlo deal probably makes a lot of sense for them, because they look for brand ambassadors, and they look for Instagram followers. They look to TikTok, to all those things in social media. So she has a following, in the UK. She has a following international. She has the Chinese market. She has multiple marketplaces there. For a Japanese company, it probably makes a lot of sense. So in tennis, everybody knows it was Djokovic, then it was Federer, Nishikori obviously being Japanese, Adam Scott in golf as well. So I think the deal is not only on court, but it will be off court as well. So that makes sense. And your contracts are not always based on your tennis ranking. They're also based on your followers. And so they're looking at it as a business point of view. They're taking a punt that they're hoping she gets back in the top 10, can start competing for slams again and win one. That would be the ultimate. But they're also looking off court. Does she generate enough press? publicity, and will we get a return on investment? And knowing them, they have done their numbers, and it's a very, very successful company. So I think it's a great partnership. I think it's going to go really well. And for me, fingers crossed, needs to get healthy and get the tennis together. And I think it's worth the punt, even paying her that much money to go with Uniqlo. So I think it's a good deal. And let's keep fingers crossed that Emma can get some great performances.
Greg, you mentioned off court a few times there. Is it subliminal messaging to Uniqlo to try and get them to sponsor us or something?
Well, I'm hoping that would be nice. I have, this is actually a Uniqlo cashmere jumper I have on right now. Not that I'm brand marking, but you've seen me with my Nike and my other mother brands as well when we're doing the podcast. But you never know. We're young in the game. We're 2 months in, and we're really enjoying what we do. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Off Court Cuts with myself, Greg Rusedski, Ashley Neaves, and Kevin Palmer. And keep watching, keep subscribing. Keep sending us loads of comments and what content you'd like to hear or us to talk about. So thanks again for joining us.